All right, it's recording. We're good. We're
We're
good.
good. I think we're good.
Matt, do you have my permission to record you?
Yeah, yes, you
Is
do.
that a legal thing I need to do?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I thought you're the boss here, Sean. I have no
Oh,
idea what's going on.
okay. All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Audiobooks from Hell, and I am Sean DeRager, and we're just gonna jump right into this thing because I don't know why not. Matt
Why
Serafini is
not?
joining me on the podcast slash videocast now. Vidcast, YouTube
Vidcast
cast.
sounds vidcast
I don't know.
vidcast sounds really good.
Sounds really techy.
It
Yeah.
also sounds kind of like full moon. Like so, I kind of like that. I don't know.
Yes, definitely has that vibe. I may be a little extra nervous now because I'm videotaping myself, and I'm not used to doing that. And so, I'll do my best to get through this. We'll get through this together. You seem really calm and collected, Matt.
Well,
How'd you
I
do?
mean, do you just look over the top of your laptop? Like that's what they say about public speaking. You just look right over their
Oh,
heads, and now it's since nobody's allowed to be together, you just kind of you look right over your laptop,
well,
and
the thing is, like, we should be used to this by now, but
oh yeah.
I'm not. I'm not.
Well, I can't. I'm trying to help you, Sean. Jesus.
I appreciate it. Appreciate the cores there. Good
Yes,
job. Good
Coors
job.
Banquet. Yeah,
Very nice.
little
I
Johnny Lawrence, little Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
yes.
wonder if they sold more because of Cobra Kai. Do you think that their sales are up?
If you had told me that I would be going into the stores looking for Coors, um,
Unironically.
yeah, unironically, before I started watching Cobra Kai, I would have told you were nuts. So I suspect. I mean, I started watching Cobra Kai recently,
Yeah.
and a couple of my friends had watched it, and we all kind of were like chatting about it. And I was like, anyone ever had Coors Banquet? And and all three of us, we were like texting each other in the liquor stores last weekend, being like, "Got it here, got it here, got it here." So I just and Brian Collins, my buddy, that a lot of people that listen to this
Uh-huh.
probably know, had the same thing. He's like, I'm 40 and I've never actually the product placement has never worked on me before, and I went out and he's on like his sixth case.
Amazing.
I didn't
Amazing.
mean to out you as an alcoholic, Brian. You like your second case, your second case.
Yeah. Yeah, Brian's a great guy. See, I
Yeah,
can't
he's a
talk
great
now.
guy.
Great,
Yeah,
great
he's a
guy.
great
Great
guy.
guy. So we actually kind of bumped into each other before I think I even knew you were an author.
Yeah.
We're just crazy guys who collect physical media and talk about movies and obsess about shitty B movies, horror movies, specifically I think horror. But there's a
Definitely.
lot of great stuff in that. There's in the B movie, you know, B and C and even D grade. There's a lot of great schlock out there. Horror, science fiction, everything. It has a little bit of everything. What's
It's
your experience, Kai? What drew you into that?
I mean, I think, going back to how we started with when I mentioned Full Moon,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think Full Moon was probably Charles Band, I think, was probably pretty close to the beginning for me because he's just, like that stuff, like the first Puppet Master came out, I think when I was 10. So like it was just kind of that, like I kind of had that interest
Mm-hmm.
from watching stuff on cable. I'd seen a couple of the Halloween sequels. My dad was very, very liberal when it came to like what he would show me as like a 8, 9 year old.
Yeah.
And it like one day like we watched like Halloween 2 on edited on like one of like the Shocktober, whatever it is, like the I'm rambling, but and I was like, well, this is really interesting, and I was asking questions because you know how Halloween 2 is. It starts like you'd seen the first one,
Oh yeah.
and my dad, now I was like 9. My dad's like, we'll go rent it this weekend, and I was like, what? Okay, so like I mean, he thought nothing of like taking me to the video store, renting Halloween, and just sitting there and watching it with
Yeah.
me at a very very young age, so I kind of had the taste for it, and then like you see that kind of like that stuff that's R-rated, like the stuff that Charles Band produces.
Yeah.
That stuff that's R-rated, but it also speaks very clearly to children. Whatever the reason, I don't know. But so like I'd watch like Puppet Master and stuff like that, and it really like codified sort of my interest in all that sort of stuff. And
Yeah.
once you start down that rabbit hole, as you well know, like you,
Yes.
you don't really ever come back from it.
No,
You know,
you
you never.
almost it makes it worse. And then you're in your 40s and you're like searching out stuff that you missed, and all these great labels like Vinegar Syndrome, specifically. But then then you have the Coda Reds, you have Synapse, you have Scorpion. I mean,
I love
it's
it
like
all.
give me just the trashiest, craziest, most obscure thing. Oh, but that movie's bad. Yeah. Yes, give it to me. I want it. You think
That
it's
means
bad.
nothing to me.
It's probably a cinematic masterpiece.
I have friends that will say, like, if a certain movie gets announced, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get that, and they'll go, it wasn't that good, and I'm like, that's meaningless to me. It's just like that doesn't mean a goddamn thing to me.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, I'm with you. How did you get started?
I think you mentioned Puppet Master, and I think that's kind of a gateway drug for a lot of us, at the age that we're at now, or and like maybe even Child's Play. I know
Yeah,
that
of course. Yep.
when I was younger. So I was raised in a very hardcore Christian family. Love you, mom and dad. I'm not probably watch this. But my upbringing was very strict. So when it came to like horror and things like that, it was like, well, that's a gateway to the devil.
Right.
So I had this extra level of like fear when it came to horror, and that almost um, made my desire grow, because we would go to the movie, to like the local video store, and be browsing for like what we'd want to watch, and I'd always end up in the horror section, and I knew that I wasn't allowed to watch any of them, and I would look at the VHS boxes, read the synopsis of it, look at the pictures, because with that grade level of horror, like, they don't care what's on the picture. They weren't censoring nothing. It's like
Yeah.
blood, gore, everything on in little pictures. So I'd look at those and read it, and kind of in my mind, what's this about, and see the beautiful kind of Drusen-ish covers on those VHS boxes, and just like my what I imagined was probably worse than what was in those movies. I remember Evil Dead was supposed to be, or Evil Dead 2 maybe. They're supposed to be the scariest movies or the most gory movies. By the time I watched them, they were not anything near what I'd imagined. That I was like, oh, isn't that bad. And then I
Right.
started kind of devouring more and more horror. So Puppet Master was always on some, one of those movie channels, HBO or whatever. And so when I was able to kind of start sneaking those movies, I would. And I would kind of get away with it with like science fiction, because like Alien and Aliens are science fiction, but I mean, come on, they're horror. Like
But they're
Alien,
horror movies.
especially, it's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
horror. It's a slasher flick with an alien.
Yeah.
Movies like Deep Star 6. I got my parents to rent one like on New Year's when that came
I
out in like
just rewatched
'88.
that, and I remember watching that with my dad when it first came out, and I was cracking up watching it again because I just remember my dad, who would sit on the couch, and he would do a thing where he would pretend he didn't want to watch all these movies, but he was doing it for me. But he loved it. He because he'd always be like, we'd be in the store, and I'd be looking at one movie, and you could tell there would be another one that he was more interested in. Why don't you get that one? That like, get that one. So but then I remember watching Deep Star 6, and he was just like, Jesus, nothing's happening in this thing. And when I watched it again, I was like, yeah, it's a little slower than I remember. It's still a lot to appreciate, though.
Oh, I mean, at that time, man, I was. It was that year Leviathan came out. It was the same year, right? Leviathan, The Abyss, and then
Yep.
Deep Star 6. So they're all being, on the posters, and the Deep Star 6 poster was just incredible. And then the
Yeah.
moment that
Yeah.
when that moment happens, when it comes and bites the guy, I mean, come on, that's some good shit. I'm,
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
huge Deep Star 6 fan. But I'll watch
So
anything underwater.
Was there resistance, like, from your parents, like, or did they finally kind of acquiesce and say, okay, you can rent some of these, like
Not
how?
not with the family. So like, really, no. Like, my mom still's like, oh, like I narrated Kill for Satan by Brian Smith.
uh,
I'm like, sorry, mom. But it's, I mean,
she
it's
doesn't
it's
have to
fine.
listen to that one.
She doesn't have to listen to it. But no, I think I finally started kind of. I learned how to copy VHS tapes. I learned how to record off the TV, so I would kind of do that stuff to kind of
Yeah.
or watch at a friend's house. I had a friend who introduced me to like the Lost Boys, and I had friends that I knew I can go and watch R-rated movies with.
Okay. So
Um,
that's how you
so
got
I kind
around it.
of grew into like as I got into high school, I was like, well, mom and dad can't really get on my case for watching this. I'm 15, 16, and I would ride my so I'd ride my bike, and I had a lot of free time in the summertime, and so I'd ride my bike. But I didn't. But I'm kind of a horror late bloomer, so I saw some of the like Puppet Master and stuff, but I didn't really start devouring horror until I was maybe a junior in high school, and then I kind of met some of the other horror kids and in my art class, and I remember I drove down to like Des Moines to visit a girl, and we watched Nightmare on Elm Street. I watched it for the first time, and
Oh, nice.
like literally I watched the movie. There was no hanky panky.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You were like,
Literally, I
hey,
was
get
like,
away, get away. I
yeah,
want
I'm
to watch this.
watching. So I kind of started devouring, and then I was like, well, what did I miss? So I kind of made up for lost time in many ways. But I've always but I was always able to watch kind of like Gremlins. So
Yeah.
there's always movies with horror elements to it that I was always devouring. So it's just one of those things that
Yeah, we grew up in that time where that, like you say, Gremlins, but I mean there was so much horror like adjacent
yeah.
stuff that you really couldn't help but get into it in some way,
Mm-hmm.
because if it wasn't Gremlins, then it was just disturbing stuff in Superman 3, or it was Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Like there was just
Definitely.
always Ghostbusters. Like there was just
Yeah.
always that kind of fantastical stuff that would just kind of pull you into it, whether you kind of wanted to go or not.
Well, I mean,
Um,
and I watched. Well, speaking of Legend,
Legend, yeah, yeah. That's actually never saw Legend until it came out on Blu-ray. That was the first time I
really,
saw it. I'd
man,
missed that,
I watched
and
that at a friend's house, and I wasn't. I don't think it was ever discussed, but I knew I saw the cover and I was like, oh, my parents aren't. They're not gonna let me watch that. There's no way. It's a huge demon on the front.
Giant Satan, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and then so I watched it on VHS at a friend's house and absolutely just loved that film. I mean, it's goofy as hell, but the just man, Tim Curry as the Dark, or holy shit, that makeup, that prosthetic, the huge horns, amazing.
I
Just
loved it. I
cemented in
loved
my head.
watching it when I finally get around to it. And I think it is goofy, but I think when you have like a Ridley Scott doing it,
Yeah.
and Ridley Scott takes it completely seriously.
Yeah.
And he completely I mean, he sells the movie. Like
Oh yeah.
it's not like a movie that, I mean, I wouldn't laugh at it. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's what Ridley Scott wanted to make.
Yeah.
I mean, and whether people like it or don't, like I think it's beautiful,
Which
imaginative.
which score do you like better?
Well, I'm not a scholar. I think I watched the director's cut first.
So he swapped
Um,
it out. He swapped out the Tangerine Dream
for
soundtrack with
Goldsmith.
Goldsmith, which they're
For
both
Gold.
like they're both great. It's just it's funny that Tangerine, because I think Tangerine Dream was what the studio wanted. He wanted Jerry Goldsmith more of a classical score, but the studio wanted more like Lady Hawk type synth
Yeah,
score.
the heroic adventure type of.
Yeah.
I
They're both great.
I I like the Tangerine Dream score though better,
Mm-hmm.
because all due respect to Mr. Goldsmith, who
I mean, you
I
can't. I mean, that's like a toss up between those two. It's like,
it's it's tough. I mean, if you put a Tangerine Dream score in your movie, like I'm on board. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
like it's a tough question for me, because my preference is probably almost always going to be Tangerine Dream, for anything. So I just listened to Tangerine Dream a lot,
yeah,
a lot. So like I went back after I'd watched the director's cut, like a week or two later, and I watched the it's like 89-minute US version or whatever.
yeah,
And I mean, I liked it because there's still so much in there, and obviously I like the Tangerine Dream score, but I think in my opinion, for the movie narratively, I mean,
yeah.
I think the director's cut is probably the way to go.
Awesome, awesome. I think they're both. Yeah, yeah. I don't think you can go wrong with either one. I think it's preference on that sucker. So I'm gonna segue into books here. um, so so the way one of the ways I got around the movie thing was I discovered the library and the horror section at the library.
Ah, beautiful.
And so of course, so I would so and then I would and film novelizations. So if
Mm.
there was an R-rated film out, I would try to find the novelization and get that and read it. Um,
That's smart.
yeah, and then of course I discovered Stephen King and like the rest as far as you know me being a fan of novels and authors and stuff like that was it for me. No pun intended. But I would stay up late and be reading these thick ass books, and I would have to like smuggle them into the house. I'd put them in my backpack and make sure because it was like I was reading stuff that was kind of above my age, but it was like I don't know the way that Stephen King wrote, and then once you kind of start going down the rabbit hole of these authors and the horror authors in the 80s and 90s, it's like there's something about the horror novel that I think touched something in me deep in something touched something deep inside. I'm rambling.
Oh yeah, I know. No, I think that. So your mom was she still? Would she like give you the? Would she scrutinize every book you brought into the
No, no,
house?
no,
Like,
no. It wasn't like that. And I think a lot of that was kind of me putting like being like, oh, well, my parents will like they'll never go for this,
yeah,
So a lot of it was maybe if they saw it, they'd be like, oh, what's this? Okay, whatever. But a lot of it was kind of I guess imposed by myself or my imagination.
right.
But
Yeah,
then
no, that
so
makes sense.
but there's something about the written word and horror because it's because you're creating basically the film in your head and you're allowed your imagination can go wherever. So there's no effects limitations. There's nothing like that. No budget limitations. You can whatever you can imagine. Um, like I think Pet Cemetery was the most frightening book I'd ever read at that time. Um, and the
I think
movies
it's
never
still
ever tapped into what the book taps into.
yeah, and it's almost like they can't in a
Mm-hmm.
way because the book is so internalized that I just I mean what it can tap into what I think the Mary Lambert movie really does a nice job of tapping into is the sort of like surface the loss and everybody can relate to
Yes.
how horrible how sad that is but what it really can't do is the internal not only the grief that Lewis goes through but sort of the his internal like I remember reading that before the film came out, and so I was also really young,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of like build up to like is he going to go through with this how and really him working through even just going through with it, and then when it happens, it's a whole other thing,
Yeah.
but but it's a really yeah I mean that's a great example I think of a movie I really like the Mary Lambert film a lot I'm probably one of its more ardent defenders over time I find always myself kind of sticking up for it
That's but I actually like both of the films, both of the attempts.
mhm.
The the latest one, I like just fine. I'll always go back to the '80s version, of course, but I think they both try to they both try, they both really try to kind of tap into that. And when you mention like grief and what grief does and how you know I don't think the movies can't touch on that. They can only go so much, and I think that's why I think that's why the novel is still around. Even as people are trying to do, everything's moving online. People are selling off their physical media collections. They're, oh, it's all online. It's all online. It's all online. And as multimedia, obsessed as we are, there's still something about the book. And even like holding a book in your hand, I think there's still something to be said there. Maybe,
Oh
it's just
I
not the
agree
same reading it on Kindle.
I went through a Kindle phase. I mean I still have one.
Mm-hmm.
One of the nice paperweights. Like that to me is like
Oh
the
yeah,
only one you could
Paperwhite.
conceivably even read on.
Yeah.
But I have one, but I just find I just find I still I don't when I'm sitting there with a Kindle at night, I don't read it for as long. And I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe it's a mental blocker somewhere. I don't know. But like
Mm-hmm.
when I have a book, um, I don't know. There's just more of a for me. There's just more of a relationship with it. You know,
Yeah.
it's just holding it. You know, and you realizing like, and maybe this is the author in me talking, but I mean, like you're realizing you've got the culmination of 2-3 years of somebody's hard work, maybe longer.
Right.
And it just feels good. So when you're kind of you know flipping through those pages, I don't know, there's an intimacy there that I personally don't feel on the Kindle. And I buy a lot of books on my Kindle. I
Mm-hmm.
and I like when I'm in the dentist office or something, like I'll pull one up and I
Yeah.
will. So I mean I do read on it. But it's not the same for me.
Yeah. I always, I think I've said this before on the show. I buy all three versions if I can. I'll buy the book, and I'll buy the Kindle version because it's usually cheaper if you buy one or the other.
Hmm.
I can't remember what you have to buy first. You buy something first, and then you get like
Yeah, they
discounted
give you a discount on Amazon.
Kindle.
You're talking, right?
Yeah, on
Yeah.
Amazon,
Hmm.
discounted Kindle, and then maybe a discounted audiobook, maybe if you already own it. So I try to
I
buy all
didn't.
three.
I guess I didn't realize there was an order because I think
There might not be.
I don't know because I definitely have had that happen, and then there's been books that I've bought where I've wanted it to happen again, and it didn't. And
Oh,
I
20
just was
bucks?
like,
What?
yeah. So like I don't know. It just always it felt very random to me, but that's interesting that there may be an order to it.
I don't know. I haven't tried to really emulate emulate
Yeah,
ice.
but I'm with you. If it's a book I really like, or if it's a book from an author that is kind of one of my like, gonna read anything this person
Yeah.
writes, um, I do. I like to buy because I like sometimes I'll go through it in different. I'll read a little bit of it, and then if I'm like taking a road trip or something and I want to continue with it, I want to
Mhm.
pull it up on my. So it's very much that type of
Yeah.
thing. And I know why they don't, but I wish publishing would jump on the digital copy, like
I
just
know.
like movie. Like I would love, like, you buy the book, it comes wrapped, you open it up, there's a little download Audible code.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, geez, that's
I mean, major publishers can do that because they have everything done at the same time.
yeah,
Independent publishers are a little bit different because you use a certain order and timing and all that
yeah,
kind of stuff.
it's tough. Yeah, and it is
Um,
you can drive yourself nuts trying to sync up like
uh,
the book and the Kindle and then the audio.
I
Oh, it's
have one book now that we were gonna try to maybe sync up, and this is for the cyberpunk doing one I'm doing right now called Behind Blue Eyes. Um,
I'm
she's
looking
writing,
forward to that.
she's writing Behind Blue Eyes 2, and it's coming out in March. And she was like, "Can we maybe get them both at the same time?" And I'm like, "My calendar's full. Like, I can't. Like,
Yeah,
I already
yeah,
kind of bumped Behind Blue Eyes ahead of a few things just because she's been marketing it, and I have a pretty good feeling that it's gonna sell well. So as a business decision, I was like, well, let me kind of move this to the beginning of the year, and hopefully it sells well, and it can kind of help fund some of the other projects that I want to do that I
yeah.
know might not sell well, but that at least maybe I can put some money towards hiring an editor instead of doing it myself.
Yeah, you're a
So
real
we'll
you're a
see.
real one for me guy, one for me, one for the what makes business sense.
Well,
That's
that's a eventually. I mean, that's definitely what I'm definitely trying to lean towards, especially since I'm doing this part time. I need to make sure that I gotta, something that got, all right, I'm paid for this, like
yeah.
some romance thing,
Yep.
and then I'll do like some indie thing. So I'm trying. My goal is to try to do one for me, one for you type thing. Um, but the, this last year with COVID and everything like that, it's just like all of our schedules. I feel like have just been
It's
we've
yeah.
all been just trying to hold on. I think.
Yeah,
Um,
hold on is a great way to describe it.
it's
It's
like
just
I'm still working on this stuff, but it's definitely not coming out as fast as I did before. And I'm still working a day job, have the family. I guess it's just being here all the time that I was like the wrench that got thrown into the engine. It's just like some people I've seen, some narrators and some authors have been like Stephen King is like, oh, here's I don't know, 5 new books. Here you go.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
there's some people that and they may have less distractions, that can just get really productive in a case like this. For me, it's been the opposite, just because every time I walk downstairs from the upstairs is where my computer is for the day job. I got 4 people
Yep.
Just hey, hey, hey. It's like
And
when
they pounce.
yeah, it's like when your boss walks out of the office, right? You're everyone in the office is I gotta talk to you. So
Yep.
that's kind of what happens with
Yep.
me.
I can
How
relate.
how have you? Because your writing is a because you have a day job as well. Like the writing is.
I do. I'm hoping not for very much longer. I did knock on everything. Knock
We're all
on
hoping like
wood.
that.
Knock on everything.
I keep doing that, but then I look at my pension and I go, so I got to crunch some numbers. But yeah,
Yeah,
how
it's
has this last year been different for your productivity? Did you step it up? Is it just like trying to hold on? What's
it's been very strange. I it when it first started, and it was like, okay, we're gonna work from home for a while. Um, I hit the ground running. I cranked out a new novel in about a month and a half. And it hasn't come out, obviously. It's not done. I wrote it was like
right?
my first draft. I did a second draft. I just finished a third draft, and so I'll do another one before anybody even gets to
Yeah.
see it. And that went really well. And that draft was probably like March to maybe May. And it went well. And then I think the realization crept in that like this was, and not, I don't mean permanent in terms of like we're gonna be doing this
Yeah.
forever,
Just
but
extended.
but I had a real serious feeling that like we were gonna be bunkering down for the long haul.
mm-hmm.
And it just started to get a lot harder because just mentally just
Yeah.
realizing like, because I mean, I think that's true for everybody. I mean, I think you're just realizing like, every day is the same and it's
Yeah.
Groundhog Day, and and if to a certain extent there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
And you just start to feel a little claustrophobic. There's not a lot to look forward to in terms of like, you can't take that vacation, or you can't go spend time with your friends at the bar. You can't, there's just a lot of things you can't do.
Yeah.
um and so I think it does weigh on people, and it started to weigh on me. I responded to that by kind of just, I throw myself into work. Like
mm-hmm.
I try not to get too bogged down in it. So I'll try and channel my energy into, I started a script. I started writing a script, and I wrote a script. I wrote it very, very slowly. Um, but and the hardest part is that there's no real structure to the day. It's
Right.
whatever your kids, for me, it was like whatever my kids need. And then it's sort of like you're tending to the day job, and you want to make sure that they're trusting you to kind of be a good soldier, and
yeah.
and do your work while you're at home. And I don't want to betray my employer's trust that way. So of course
Exactly.
you're doing that. And then you're also, you're exploring your creative endeavors at the
Yeah.
at the same time. And the hard thing is, it's just sometimes, you can't get away from one thing to do the other. So it's just sometimes you just kind of feel like nothing got done today, or there
Yeah.
was no productivity, and you're still being productive. Like you said, you're not doing it as fast as you, but that doesn't matter. Like you're still cranking stuff out. You did my book, which wasn't an easy book. You did it. It didn't take you that long. You know what I mean?
yeah.
And I
For
don't
me,
mean
it felt
that
like
as
it took. For me, it felt like it took forever. It was like, oh my god, I'm only halfway through the book.
well, it's a long book too, I think. And I
I'm
don't
doing a.
mean that. I don't mean that though to say like, geez, you didn't spend any time on it at all. You did. You did a great job. And anybody who might be thinking about Sean, like, one of the best experiences I've ever had in terms of how serious you take the text. Like you really wanted to get it right.
Oh
And
yeah.
and that is, as somebody who, you know, no, I think I told you privately, and I don't mind even saying it publicly now. I had one audiobook I had taken down twice
yeah.
because it was produced in both times. I didn't think it could be worse. The first time it came out, it was terrible. And
Oh.
it was an embarrassment. And it was my first audiobook. I had nothing to do with it. And it was just it was awful. And then the second one, I complained. They took it down. They're like, "We'll do it again. We'll make sure you're happy." I never heard from them, and they did a second one. It was even worse somehow. Um, so
Oh,
that's an experience that you can have. Now I will say that any audiobook of mine that you can go on Audible and buy today, I think the narrators have all done great jobs. I'm not the,
yeah.
none of the books that you can buy today are who I'm talking about. And any book that's out there now, I am grateful for all the narrators. They've all done me well. But you were very, very particular about getting certain things right, and really wanted to get my input on that, and that was great.
Well,
I wanted to thank you for that, because it was a great experience, and it speaks a lot to you as a professional, that really were that invested in the work to make sure that
yeah.
it was
Well,
done right.
yeah. I mean, as a narrative, and the book we're talking about is Open Grave or Open Grave,
Ocean Grave
Ocean Grave. I always say like open water,
or open
ocean
water. It
water,
doesn't,
Ocean Grave.
who cares? No, I do go buy the book.
uh, Ocean Grave, and that came out last summer.
Last summer, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, yeah, that was such a fun book to do because it was really challenging in the fact that it was, you liken it to like a Clive Cussler novel, which is a fantastic. Is it Clive Cussler, right? Am I saying that right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which he does like a lot of aquatic adventure type things, and a very popular, he's a very popular author in that genre. I had fun kind of looking over his books. When you mentioned that, I did like kind of a deep dive into Clive Cussler, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is great.
Yeah, he's
Um,
good. He's a
and
very fun escapist guy.
yeah,
Good.
and that's what this was it was, high adventure off the coast of Madagascar, and there's also a giant man-eating fish.
Yep.
And the challenging thing about it for me was like I need to kind of channel all these different like nationalities, voices. I did get my first review on Sean DeRager needs to work on his French accent. So I did get that first
Oh,
one.
you got that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which I knew I was gonna get that sort of comment, So
When is his Dark Materials gonna come out?
I don't know. Can you see the doors closed and I'm talking to somebody and
But still, when
this
is it,
this
the
winter,
Dark Material? Oh.
wintertime. Okay. All right. Every podcast every podcast I've ever done, from like the Screamcast all the way, every podcast he makes an appearance, and I can't edit this because
Hey,
it's on
mate.
video.
Yeah, hey, it's all good. Let him appear.
They're wondering when his Dark Materials is coming back to HBO because
Oh,
they're hooked on that series.
there.
And anyway, so the accents and stuff, and I knew
The
doing the
accents.
French accent. I'm like, look, this ain't perfect. You're giving this thing a go. And when I had coaching on accents, I was told that you want to give the flavor of the accent. You're not ever going to get it perfect for an audiobook. You need to just get the flavor of the accent. So if they
Hmm.
hear, oh, they're French, oh, okay, they're French. And the whole goal was that I was like, I can't. I was like trying not to do Pepe Le Pew. I was trying not to do the French accent like the Monty Python, like hey 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 mon chéri. I was like, I can't do that. So, which is easy to do, which is fun to
When
do.
you told me that you had gotten the job from Severed, I instantly, in my mind, I just went to some of those, like the Malagsy names, and I was just like,
Whew.
God, better you than me, brother. Like,
And then like
I had the easy
and
part.
then so then I researched the Malagasy accent,
Yeah.
and it's like this weird blend um of like stereotypical, like I guess African, accent with like the French accent with
With a little bit of, yeah.
with like Polynesian.
Hmm.
So because I started reading the history of Madagascar and the history of of that island and the French occupation of it, and how Polynesian settlers would and it's just, I was like, I'm just need to just kind of settle on just a basic kind of stereotypical but not over the top kind of
No,
African
I don't.
accent
Yeah,
of some
I
sort.
don't think it was. I think it
Oh,
was.
but I like had nights where I was like I couldn't sleep because I was like, oh God, someone's gonna say, like, oh, here's this white guy trying to do these African, accents, and I was just like, oh my God, and so the thing is, like, I was just like, try to just keep it subtle,
Yeah,
it's the character, don't do stereotype, but man, but when you get a challenging book like that to narrate, that's like a learning. You've learned something, and with every challenging book I've learned something. If I breeze through a book, I don't think I've learned something. And there's a few books that are
right.
great books, and I just got them done fast, but I didn't hit a major challenge. So, Ocean Grave is definitely on the list of like that I kind of learned a lot doing that one, just because it was so sprawling in the narrative.
Yeah, I have to say, I mean, I can once I'm done with a book, like I'm done. Like because it's been edited, it's been
Yeah.
reviewed, I've gone through it 20 times. Like I can't I can't stand to even think of it again because it's just it's been such a process. That one and again, I'm lucky with all of my narrators because with the exception of Farrell, which is just that one, like everything I just said about not being able to go back to all my books, it's compounded with Farrell just because that was my first novel. And so when I look back at any of my books, like all I see are the things that should be done differently. Like that's
Oh
true. I
yeah.
think you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But
Every
I
book I
still I'm
narrate, I'm like, oh, I fucked that up,
right. And it's and I don't want to dissuade anybody. I'm still proud
Yeah.
of my books. Like
Yeah.
I like them, and I think that, like, I think they're all worth reading. All right. I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that, like, I couldn't do that with Farrell, but every other book I actually did listen to the narrator narrate them all the way through because again, I've been very lucky with narrators. But I found that, yeah, I didn't find anything that you had done to be, the French accent. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly how I would have done it. It's because it's not obtrusive, and
Right.
it's not a caricature.
Yeah.
And that's, unless you happen to be a native French speaker, like that's how
Well,
it should be.
this was I think the review was on the UK Audible site, so it may
Yeah, well,
offend.
and then in that case, I can't begrudge them. But what do you want?
What do you want? Hey, come
Uh,
on, I'm doing my best here.
I,
uh,
I I'm proud of it, and I think you did a phenomenal job. So thank you.
the You're welcome. You're welcome. The thing that I was most surprised about with Open Water was because I'd read
Open. Are we talking about open water or
Open
Ocean
Water.
Grave?
See, I do it all the time. I do it all the time. Ocean Grave.
I
I
liked open water.
Yeah. I always, whenever I put something on social media, I always have to go back and double check. Did I write Ocean Grave or Open Water? Because I've read Feral and Devil's Row. Actually, listened to the audiobooks of those because
Oh, cool.
Matt Godfrey did Feral,
Hmm.
and then
And he did a great job. It's the onus was just on me that I can't
oh
listen to it. It's my
yeah
it's my you know what I mean.
yeah,
He did it. I was lucky to get him. He did a phenomenal job.
and then I'm having a brain blank on the narrator who did Devil's Row because
Oh,
I don't want to spoil her pseudonym. I know her real name. I'm like, what's
yeah, Ramona Master.
Ramona Master.
Yep,
Yes,
yep.
and
And she's I loved, like, that one. That was one that, again, like Ocean Grave, accents, lots of different accents.
yeah,
And I didn't even preface when I hired her. I didn't even preface to say, like, oh yeah, one guy's a Brit, like, well, actually there's two Brits. And I didn't go through any of that. And so, like, I remember one night I had this. I woke up almost in a cold sweat, going, "Oh my God! Like, what if she's not okay with that?" And I ran downstairs and, like, pulled up Audible and ACX and was
uh-huh.
emailing her. And she wrote back and she's like, "Oh, I'm already working on it. I'm more than comfortable doing that." And I was
Yeah,
like, "Oh," and I thought
yeah.
she did a phenomenal job.
She's awesome. She's awesome. And then Joe Hempel's done. He did the one about the cannibals, right?
Oh, I have not worked with Joe.
No, wait, no, I'm thinking. Sorry, I'm thinking of
I'm thinking
Adam
of Adam.
Caesar.
Yes, yes. I was,
Yeah,
yeah. Yes,
getting you
he did.
guys
I think
mixed up.
it's
Because
common.
you,
It's a common
it is. I mean, you
group.
both. So this is what's the topic I want to get on, because just like Adam Caesar, is it Caesar? Your books read like kind of 80s B level, horror flicks. And that's what I love. And that's so circle back to what I was going to say about Ocean Grave is I was surprised when I realized that it was more than just that.
Yeah.
Because I thought it was just going to be, some gore-filled killer fish thing with like a ton of, heavy body count. But this was more of like, like Arthur Quarterman or,
Oh,
Indiana
you talking
Jones.
Alan Quartermain?
Alan.
Yes.
See, I mess
Yep.
I mess up names all the time.
Yep.
Alan Quarterman, like that kind of thing on the water
Yep.
with a giant fish. It's not even like, I don't know, like there's just so much more to the book, and I appreciated that. Some people are gonna feel like they got gypped. I think they're thinking, oh, this isn't just some killer fish book, but
I think so.
it's so much more. And
Well, thank you for saying that. I think that people do feel that way, and I mean that's partially my fault because but it's also not, because I think Severed Press, Gary from Severed Press, the gentleman who runs Severed Press, had been after me to do another aquatic horror, because my first aquatic horror book was called Island Red, and which you can't get on audiobook. Now, if you were paying attention earlier, I'll just leave you to put those pieces together. But in Island Red was a kind of another mashup. But it was more genre centric. It
mm-hmm.
was kind of Jaws meets Night of the Creeps. And it's basically about an alien parasitic worm that basically gets inside of a frilled shark off the coast of Florida, and it keeps these people trapped on this little island in Florida as a hurricane is descending, and as the parasite eats it. It reproduces, and so you get these little tiny worm slugs that go on land and start getting into the villagers, and it's like it creates this whole mess. But I didn't want to, obviously, like I took the job because Gary was like, well, that did really well, we
Mm-hmm.
people would like to get another book from you, but I can't repeat myself.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can't do exactly what you described. I mean, there's a lot of books that Severed puts out that I enjoy reading, that do that kind of thing very well. High body count,
Yeah.
pretty short, very kind of contained, like just very sleazy, gory, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that's a significant part of Severed's reader base. I think that's what they want. And I kind of knew when I started to think about Ocean Grave, I was like, they're not necessarily going to like this, but I don't care, because
Yeah.
this has to be something that I like first and foremost.
Totally. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, my sort of my thought was like, let's make this big rollicking, adventure. Let's have a really interesting, hopefully she was interesting, female character, be the kind of our resident Indiana Jones.
Yep.
And just put this really eclectic cast of characters around her. And once I didn't know where I was going to set it, and then like you, I took this deep dive into Madagascar. I took a book out of the library. I watched like a bunch of documentaries on Madagascar, and I really loved Madagascar.
Mm-hmm.
Like I became really enamored with like the people, the culture. It seems like such a beautiful place. I regretfully haven't been there yet. But so that just became like, okay, that's where it's gonna be. And
Yeah.
From there it kind of. But
it was fun. I mean, that's the thing. It was like I was like, oh, this will be an easy narration. I'll get through it. And then I started prepping it, and I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be okay. Here we go. Roll up my sleeves, which I kind of do that to myself though. Like I have more fun, even though I drive myself crazy. I think I have more fun with challenging work.
Yeah.
Once it's done, you're like, oh, got through that. And that's probably why I could. There's easier voiceover stuff to do, but for some reason, here I am doing audiobooks, which is probably like the hardest voiceover type job to do, and I'm doing it like basically on the side for fun.
I
Like
think that the tough thing for you too, I would imagine, is that like you don't have a director, so like
no
you're
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 self-directing.
you're you're yeah, you're interpreting everything, and you're very attentive, like you were very much like picking, you were right there in the text, like dialed
Yeah.
in, which is phenomenal, because I don't, again, I haven't had this experience, but I don't think everybody is in the business, like I
No,
would
I mean, I might even go the extra mile, but see, but if you're coached, like this is what the coaches tell you to do. So there's a lot of people who are looking at like voiceover and narration and they're seeing people who are putting out tutorials on YouTube and stuff who say they're coaches and stuff, giving you information, but not necessarily maybe the best.
mm,
Or there's people that think this is just a job that I can just do to make some extra cash. Oh, it's COVID. Oh, I'm stuck home. I'm gonna be a narrator, and people come to me and I'm like, I shouldn't. I was under the impression too, like, oh, I'll make some easy money. Uh, it's probably the hardest thing that I've ever had to do because I had to set up a booth. There's so much more that I didn't realize. It's not just sitting down and reading a book, which
it's not,
what
no.
a lot of people would think, and I don't blame them. I thought the same thing, but once you start doing it, it's like, oh my god, um, this is so much more, and so you can get people who just are just reading it, and they're
Yeah,
not acting, they're not
right.
trying to emote, and I'm already a very expressive person, so I already, I guess, naturally have that going for me. So it was an easy transition. Once I kind of got it, I was like, oh, okay. And then I paid some money for coaches, had a few coaching sessions, and kind of got dialed along the right, put along the
But
right path.
it shows, you know what I mean, like it, because not every character in that book, is, I think I wouldn't have known how to play them. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like Kaheen the pirate, I thought was a really freaking tough. Like I was thinking about you going, I don't know, like that's a tough guy to do, because
Yeah.
he's a villain, but I also really liked him.
Because he
I
also
became
has like this background with he has a family that
Yeah,
he has motivations, that aren't necessarily. He's taking the motivations and going the wrong way with them to kind of, but in the back of his mind, he's like, well, I'm just trying to take care of, my family in the long
his
run.
family, and there's a sense of responsibility to the island, to the
Yeah.
to the people that are kind of like laid up, no economy to
Yeah.
support them, and yeah, and I thought you really did a good job of capturing that, in a way that made him empathetic and complex, in a
Mm-hmm.
way that I don't know, I just think, I don't know, you don't I wasn't expecting you to go kind of, into some of that as much as you did. So again, I was delighted,
Cool.
because I think it was like, oh wow, that's great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's nice to hear him realized, in an audiobook, with
Yeah.
a real performance behind it.
That's awesome. And thank you, man. That means it really does mean a lot. Because half the time I'm doing this going, I hope, I hope this works.
Yeah, and you
You
don't
know.
have it there. Yeah, that's what I mean. That's the tough thing, is like you don't have that person looking over your shoulder. Go, oh yeah, no, this is,
Yeah.
this is right on. So I mean, like that's gotta be, well, it's I think comparable to like when we send out our manuscript to, like, our editor or
Yeah.
whatever, and you're like, I hope this isn't a total piece of shit, because I don't know.
Yeah.
Uh, and I
Yeah.
think that's how it goes.
So how long have you been writing? When did you start? When did you decide to, like, oh, I'm gonna be an author? Because we're talking about audiobook production and stuff like that. I mean, it's I couldn't imagine writing a novel, and I'm thinking about, I have an idea that I want to do a novella next year, but it scares me to death. And when did you decide, like, oh, you know, yeah, I write for some movie sites, I do some stuff. I'm gonna do a novel. I'm gonna tell a story in many chapters.
Yeah, I don't know. It was early. I knew I always kind of wanted to do this.
Yeah.
When I was like a little kid, like I'm talking like fourth and fifth grade, and I went to a Catholic school till eighth grade, and this is, I think, a sign of how much things have changed. Um, we used to do creative writing. There was like a period where you would do creative writing, and so I was 10, and I would do Friday the 13th stories, but they would be about my classmates. And so
That's
in
awesome.
every single story, my classmates would be massacred by Jason. And I would name them. I would write them by name and say, like, and then Christina had a spear rammed through her heart, and like, and I remember it got to the point where my teacher was very, very sweet, and she said, like, I know that you're just, you like kind of the dark stuff, and you're expressing, yourself. Um, let's not write about death and murder in the next assignment, okay? And it was like, it was very sweet. Because I can't imagine today not being put on like some watch list and gone and thrown into counseling and all of that type of stuff. Which maybe there was merit to, I don't know. Maybe I should have been, I don't know. But so the germ was there. I think really I talk a lot about this when we have like our little author powwows, but I guess I've never really answered this in an interview or anything. I kind of had like two phases of influences, which is like when I was younger and I was pouring through paperbacks and I would read. Obviously I read all the Stephen King I could get my hands on. Because what's funny is, kind of going back way back to the beginning of our conversation. My mom was the harder of the two. Like, my dad would rent me whatever the hell,
Hmm.
but my mom would go along with it until she saw what we were watching. And like, one day, which wasn't even that bad comparatively, but we rented
Yeah.
Lethal Weapon,
Uh-huh.
and it was like, I was watching it with my dad, and I think my brother was still living at home at the time. And we were watching Lethal Weapon, and like, literally, you remember the opening scene of Lethal Weapon is a nude woman jumps to her death off of
Yeah.
off a balcony, and my mother comes in because they're playing Jingle Bell Rock, and she comes in, and she's like, "I love that. What is it? Get that off the screen. Get out." So she pulls me out of the room, and like, I have to go sit in like the parlor, and like, we're watching, I don't know, we're watching like Disney Channel or something. And I hear my brother and my dad cracking up the whole friggin' time they're watching Lethal Weapon. And I was just like so
Oh
sour. But
man.
but what was funny about my mom was she would buy me horror novels from yard sales and flea markets and stuff. And so she had no idea that she was like giving me the worst stuff. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
because
Like,
you
cuz
can you can say, yeah.
she brought me home It one day, and so I actually was reading It in fifth grade. I that and obviously it's well documented at this point. We don't have to get into it, but
Right.
there's scenes in It um that are absolutely a million times worse than what you can
Yeah.
rent from the video store. And so it was funny because my mom was doing a great thing, I think, because she was through her ignorance, she was getting me the stuff that I really wanted to read. She knew I didn't want to read like the stuff that kids were reading at the time.
Yeah.
Like, she'd try and buy me like C.S. Lewis, and nothing against C.S. Lewis. I love Prince Caspian, and when I did finally read that stuff, loved it. But at the time I was like very specific. I
Yeah.
wanted horror. So she would just load me up. She would bring me home stuff. So I was reading Stephen King, and the other guy that I love just as much, if not more, is F. Paul Wilson,
Mm.
and whose novel The Keep is
Yeah.
probably my favorite horror novel. It's just great. And I just got really hooked on that kind of stuff. And through high school, American Psycho came out when I was in high school, and that was a real dangerous book. and
Mm.
and 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 just having that kind of at the time when it felt like just having it was dangerous, and people would be like, "Oh, you're reading that."
Yeah. Like if you're, I had a friend who was like reading Fight Club. He would like go to the cafe and read Fight Club
Yeah.
in college, and people would be like, "Oh, he's reading Fight Club."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was kind of that. It was kind of that. But I loved those books, and it made me feel like, okay, like that's definitely. I like to write. I've always liked to write. So that was kind of the kernel. And then I would say that really the second part, and probably the more important part, was when I was in college, and I would go to like Borders or Barnes and Noble and buy stuff out of the horror section, the leisure books, and I would buy Brian Keene, J.F. Gonzalez, um, Jack Ketchum, and just anything leisure published. And
Mm-hmm.
I would devour Ed Lee. I devoured that stuff. Just could not get enough of it. And those guys were so fucking good. And they were writing about, there seemed to be no limits. They were writing all across the spectrum, just about everything, any type of subject matter. And that's what made me go, I can do this, and not in an arrogant way, like I can do what these guys did, not like that at all. But it made me go, these guys are writing awesome shit that I can't get enough of. Like I went through, I think, almost the entire leisure catalog in college. So that's really what made me go and sit down, and I think while I was still in college was when I started outlining Feral, in terms of like, that was always my first book. And I was like, I'm gonna take a little bit of Ed Lee, who writes really nasty, perverted, what is wrong with this guy kind of stuff, and I'm gonna take a little bit of that.
Yeah.
um and it kind of just put it all into like my own sort of spirit, and that became Feral. And Feral was pretty slow to bake, but that was, I remember kind of like before I graduated, writing like character outlines and character histories and stuff. So it was all kind of there, and directly from the leisure stuff that sort of got me to sit down and do it.
Well, Feral especially feels right out of right off my bookshelf full of the paperbacks, the horror paperbacks. I mean, it feels 100% from that ilk, and not even like you're trying to emulate it. It feels like someone could find that in a stack of books in some shitty rundown bookstore, and it would fit right in with those, because it definitely has that feeling for sure.
It does. And I wrote it to be, I mean, at the time I wanted it to be a leisure book. Like that was was the goal. The goal was like, I wanted to see the little leisure spine on that Matt Serafini. And they, by the time I finished, like they were like beginning to crumble and go away. And I was like, no, this was my game plan. I don't have another plan.
Brian Smith was like the last
Brian Smith was another
leisure authors.
And Brian, and I meant to include him in all that. Brian Smith was a tremendous influence as well. Like just these guys were just rock stars in my mind.
So good. I need to. We're trying to work out an interview. I think his dog's been sick and everything like that. So, but definitely I'll be talking to him soon. I gotta start wrapping up, because I think dinner's ready.
Okay. All right.
I heard my wife calling for me. That dinner's ready, but yeah, we're looking good on time. This is about how I like to keep these. But you and I, like, we could probably talk for another hour or two if someone let us. But
yeah, if you're looking to do it again, I'll come back. We'll talk about vinegar syndrome. We could do a whole show.
Man, so good, so good.
Yeah.
I wish they would release novelizations of some of the movies. Can we announce anything right now, or no?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. Just because it could be really, really early.
I know.
Okay. And there's a lot of stuff like I want to talk about with it too, but because it's been fun. It's led me down some interesting paths. But there's more. There'll be more to say later.
When you have some things to announce, we'll talk more, because there's some things you have cooking that I know about that everyone watching or listening should be very excited about. So
yeah, I think it'll be cool. I do. Yeah.
Is there any projects that you have kind of simmering that it will be announced or are going to be coming out soon. I'll leave. Well, and we'll end the show, I guess, with plugs.
Yeah, I hope so. But the awful thing is I've got a novel that I'm hoping will be announced at some point. I don't know. Like it's completely out of my hands. It's like it's in that weird arena.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got maybe some movie scripts that I may have some good news about very soon too, but they're also in that weird. So it's like it's really weird because like what I would say because people will ask me all the time like, hey, your last book, Rights of Extinction, was like 2 years ago now.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but it wasn't. Like I promise I'm writing a lot of stuff. But it's kind of
all in that, yeah.
Yeah, it gets out of my control at this point. I haven't done a small press book since then, and hopefully I'll get back to that too. But yeah, it's a really weird. It's like I want to plug stuff, but I have nothing to plug. But I will say, Rights of Extinction is technically my last novel, and if you haven't read it, you should go read that.
Who did the audiobook of Rights for Extinction?
Rights of Extinction was Angel Clark. She primarily does a lot of YA stuff, and I really liked her work, and I got really annoying with her in a very respectful way, but I got really
look this is basically a giallo novel, so here's some things you need to know.
She was like, the only reason I'm doing this is because I've never done a horror novel before, and it's short. It just wasn't her purview. It wasn't her purview at all.
Yeah, it's like 100-something pages. I saw that number and I'm like on 100. I'm like on Behind Blue Eyes. I'm on page 125 right now, and it's like a 500-page book. I'm like, oh, yeah. And I'm looking. I just saw Under the Blade was like 120 something pages, and I was like, I would have been.
Yes, it's a novella.
Sorry, Rights of Extinction.
It's very.
I need to scroll up. No, Rights of Extinction is not the giallo. That's Under the Blade. I'm getting everything confused right now.
Yeah, Under the Blade is a slasher. It's kind of it's sort of like what a Friday the 13th story would be if it was in a novel. To say that it has a larger story, that it's not just kids in the woods getting killed. It's sort of about the final girl who killed one of these murderers when she was a teenager, and then we pick up with her 25 years later.
Got it.
And that's the story.
Is there a giallo influence at Rights of Extinction, or did I just pull out on my ass?
No, Rights of Extinction is a kind of a folk horror novel. It's
I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah, no. It's all good. If it gets people interested, it's all good. If it's a giallo, if a giallo sounds good to you, it's a giallo.
Yeah. I don't know why I thought that. I think maybe because of the cover, the eyeball.
Yeah, it definitely has that eyeball on the cover.
Yep. And then Rights of Extinction with a knife. I'm just like thinking giallo for some reason. No black gloves on any of these covers.
No. Can you believe it?
If you want to write a giallo novel, just credit me in like the thank yous or something like that.
I have a giallo novel written, and it's a first draft, and it's a modern, very, very, very modern giallo, like modern people, very 2021 people in a giallo. And I did a first draft of it a couple years ago, and I realized like I wasn't quite equipped to do this yet because it's a very I trunked it, and I'm if I get time this year, like towards the end of the year, that's what I'd like to do is actually take that out and kind of go through that again and get that out, because I really liked it, and I think nobody's doing that kind of stuff. It's a horror novel, but it's also it's a mystery, and I think it's very marketable. So I do need to get back to that, but I do have one. I have one in the trunk.
Nice.
It's my only trunk novel.
That's what I love about writing, especially, is you can kind of table something or trunk something and come back around to it, and kind of dust it off and rework it, and that's awesome. An awesome way of to use your creativity is to kind of put something away and come back to it. You can kind of, I guess, do that with art. I tell my daughter, I'm like, if you are sick of a painting you're doing or a drawing, I go, just put it away, and then come back to it in like a month or so, and then add detail, or maybe your passion will come back to it. So
I think
I'm
that's
a
absolutely
proponent
true.
of kind of letting things kind of simmer.
Yeah, perspective is everything, and experience, can add to it. So I just, I mean, I remember I got to the end of it and I thought, it feels wrong. Like it feels like the bones are there. There's really a good structure, but it's not it. And I knew it just inherently felt like it needed to go back in the oven, so to speak. So
very nice. All right, Matt Serafini, thank you so much for
thank you,
talking to me
man.
today. I better get out there and eat with the fam. And we're gonna talk again. I know it. So
I think so. Yeah, give my best to the fam and enjoy your dinner.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening or for watching, and I'll talk to all of you next time.
Take care.
All right. Oh, I didn't hold for the music to fade. I'm not gonna do any editing on the video. They're gonna get this is how they're gonna get it.
They'll be fine. It's not they know how to do it. They know how this works.
They got it.